we are going to talk about how to homebrew monsters for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Ooh, wow. I really hope you guys enjoy. This topic is kind of complex. There's a lot of like moving pieces and bits and parts when it comes to homebrewing. So I tried to break it down in something that's simple and hopefully a bit easier to understand. But we'll find out. Maybe it'll be a shit show. Let's jump right in. Oh, I gotta click it. Okay. All right. So first we're going to talk about some goals and limitations as like why you would even want to homebrew monsters and what struggles you might, you know, kind of run into when just trying to do this in the first place. So some reasons might be you might want to surprise your players, especially if you have a lot of veteran players that know a lot of the classic D&D monsters. You may want to challenge them in a new and particular way that you might not be able to do from a standard monster. Or you just maybe want something unique or specific to the story that you're trying to tell. Or, you know, there's just something that like is a niche that maybe D&D hasn't quite filled yet with the monsters it has out. And you want to try and fill that niche. Was, you know, something that you create. So some limitations might be the time you have. Homebrewing a monster from scratch, especially if you're trying to properly balance it, can take time. There are faster methods, which we're going to talk about, most notably the Reskin method, as well as kind of we talked about this earlier a little bit, but the knowledge that your players might have. This more so applies to if you have a lot of veteran players at your table. I know for me, like, if a DM reskins a beholder, it's cool and I love it, but sometimes if they don't do enough of a reskin, then I'm like, after like round one, I'm like, okay, well, I still know that's a beholder. It just, you know, may look different. So that might be a limitation. Also, CR or character level. Specifically, I wanted to bring this up because the challenge rating system in Dungeons and Dragons, which is what CR stands for, is unfortunately not the best. It's just not well balanced. There are a lot of monsters that don't fit into the right CR categories, and it's really difficult to kind of understand. And also, character level is important here because, well, you don't want to homebrew like an ancient, super powerful god tier, 90 damage per breath weapon, ancient dragon, and like your party's 3rd level. You can do that, but like, you know, you're probably gonna wipe your party. Just gonna be honest if you use that against them. So it's just kind of like some smaller things that you want to make sure that you put, you know, thought into, stuff like that. Also, some limitations might be just, which, you know, like the main one that's not here is really balance which is CR. I guess it is here. Anyway. Yeah. That's it for goals and limitations. Let's go to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about challenge rating and balancing. What a smooth transition. So smooth. Oh, for sure. All right. So what is challenge rating? So challenge rating, or commonly referred to as CR, is how a monster is ranked according to its power level for 5e. This system is also coming back in D&D 5.5, or really it's still 5th edition, but we all call it 5.5. It's 5.5 because it has to be backwards compatible. But basically, the higher the number is on a scale, then the more difficult the monster is to defeat. Generally, how I see challenge rating is if you have a party of 4 players, so say a challenge rating 4 monster would be like a medium-ish level difficulty encounter for a party of 4 player characters. That's how I kind of tend to look at it. It's not always that way. Sometimes it varies. Maybe your party's stronger than average. Maybe the CR of the monster is much weaker than average. So that's why it's kind of a difficult system, because it's based very much on like a standard 4-person party. But then even on that basis, a lot of the monsters are just not correctly rated, to be honest. There are some that like monsters with lower CR that should have much higher CRs, and there are like much lower CRs that should be higher, but you know, pish posh. So CR kind of does have to do with level in that it doesn't have to do with the level of the creature, but it has to do with the level of your party. Because if you have a CR 17 monster, that's going to be too high for a CR 5 or like a party of 5th level adventurers. But if you have a CR 1 monster, that's going to be way too easy for a party of level 5 adventurers. Depending on how you want to run your games, of course, it's all up to the DM and what you and your players are okay with, but just mechanically speaking, that's generally how it works. So if you have a level a challenge rating 5 monster, that's a good equivalent for generally a level 5 party of 4 players. That's kind of how it functions generally, at least from my own experience. So how do you balance a monster? This is a great question. And you know why it's here? Practice. Look, the CR system is so disgustingly broken, and it just is not good. It's not a good system currently the way it's written now. It's very unbalanced because the monsters inside it are unbalanced. I think it just takes a lot of practice. I've been dungeon mastering for, I don't know, a good amount of years now, and it's still something that sometimes I do struggle with a little bit. But I try and tailor it the best I can to whatever I'm creating to the party that I'm currently working with. So say if you had, a level 5, we're gonna use level 5, it's a good baseline, like a level 5 party, but you have like 2 wizards and a barbarian, a ranger, and a bard. And you want to figure out how to balance an encounter for this party. What I would recommend doing is kind of averaging all of their hit points, looking at what their ACs are, and looking at how much damage they can kind of do. And then, be like, okay, so based off all these numbers, what would I think would be best? So like, say if your average party HP is 40, you might want your monster to do probably between maybe like 7 to 12 to 15-ish damage on a hit. 15 being on definitely the higher end. Depending on how many hits it's going to get each turn. This is definitely where the more complex and overwhelming aspects of homebrew come in, but don't worry. We are going to talk about much easier ways to homebrew and do something a little bit quicker and dirtier. But if you're ever looking for a CR, it's always going to be somewhere on the stat block. So you can see here with our ogre zombie, challenge rating 2. And then we've got a list of some dragons up here. 11, 14, 17, 15, 2. So these, when you see these like numbers, those are going to be the challenge rating and not the level of the monster. Which is also kind of the level of the monster. It's weird. But, it's not bad. So, now we're going to talk about our first actual method of how to homebrew monsters. This is definitely the one I use most commonly. I think it's the one a lot of DMs use the most. This is the reskin method, where you take a monster and you get him in front of you, all right? You get him in front of you. You grab his face, and you strip all the skin off, and then you take the skin from another monster, and you throw it on there. And then you got a new monster. So it's the quickest and simplest way to homebrew, and it uses the stat blocks of already existing monsters in the game. So generally, what you want to do is make very minimal changes, potentially things like damage type or maybe the range of an attack, something that's very small but can still make a difference in how it feels different, enough that you can make these changes in under 5 minutes. And then really the biggest change here for what you want to do is you want to have a heavy focus on description and aesthetics of the monster over actual mechanical changes. So look at this example right here, right? So let's use the vampire, right? So if I describe this gentleman, right? what you see, like, as you walk into the room, sitting on a massive throne in the center of the castle, you see a pale man with long black hair and pointed ears, as he wears a beautiful blue suit, and you can see a bright red gem on the center of his ascot as he smiles at you and his fangs glare. Like, you know him, that's a fucking vampire, right? But then, as you and your party walk into the center room of the castle, you see sitting on the throne an extremely gaunt woman with a bright red dress and ribbons floating all around her. You can see her flesh is almost translucent. She's so thin. And she has long, almost inhumanoid nails. And her hair is continuously flowing in the wind. But most notably, you watch as she has a wreath of eyeballs that constantly float around her head. And she just looks at you. And then you're like, whoa, what the fuck is that? I don't know what that is, you know? So when you compare those descriptions, like, those are very different, even though they could use very similar or even the exact same stat blocks for the same creature. So I'm going to go ahead. I know we just talked about an example, but I'm going to show you guys a real example here. I was going to use the actual vampire stat block, but then I forgot that bitch is so long. So we're going to use the vampire spawn stat block. And we're going to try and do something like we did here, right? But now we're just going to make some small mechanical tweaks to actually kind of get the vibe that we're going for. So we want something that is more psychic based and more psychic prowess to kind of capture the idea of like why this woman has these eyeballs like floating around her head. So we have the vampire spawn stat block right here. And they have the ability spider climb. So they can climb difficult surfaces, including upside down on ceilings without needing to make an ability check. So instead of having a spider climb, all I did was make this, instead of basically having a climbing speed, they're just going to have a hover speed or a fly speed, which is a little bit more powerful, but it's not the end of the world because spider climb is still a pretty powerful ability. So the power gap isn't huge. And the other main change I wanted to do here is make their attacks deal psychic damage, whether it is her claws or her nails, which we did describe in the character description, so that's a prominent point. And it would be interesting, right, to have a physical attack that does psychic damage. So how would you describe that to your party? And it's just a quick little, and then all the attacks psychic damage. It's done. And then for the stake to the heart feature, something that almost kind of keeps the vampire essence, but is still making it different. Instead of making it a stake to the heart, just make it a stake to the head, because this monster focuses on their brain power and their psychic energy. So instead of the heart, just move it to the head. And it still gives the players a fun way to be like, boop, they're dead now. So also, because she is more psychic based, all you have to do here, leave the bite attack as it is, just make it do psychic damage, and then give the claws a range of 30 feet or vice versa. And then all you have to do is change how you describe the attack. So say if we give our claws a range of 30 feet instead of bite, we can describe it like this. All right, as you go to attack with your sword, you watch as this terrifying womanoid-like creature doesn't even move, but you feel along the back of your neck a cold sensation that grips your skin and begins to peel down as you feel the warm blood trickle down. Like, that's terrifying. Like, she's just looking at you and like your skin is getting clawed away at. You know, and you can do the same thing with the bite. So an example is bite. As this woman dodges your attack as you go to strike with your sword, she lunges around you, and her mouth unopening, you feel on the other side of your neck almost like pincers grasp and take root into your flesh as you feel your vitality leave you. You know, something like that. So it's more descriptor based, and it's super minimal changes to like the actual stat block. And all this is, you know, is hopefully stuff you can remember, or you can just jot it down in a notebook really quick before combat starts. So that's the main focus for this one, is very minimal changes, but you're really just changing the actual description versus the mechanics of how the monster works to make them seem more interesting or new to your players. And this is great, especially if you're a GM on a time budget like most of us are. So reskinning, probably the most common. It's the easiest to use and to understand. You don't need to know a lot about balancing and all of that like shit for this. Really, it's really just reflavoring, you know? And you can do it in less than 5 minutes, even with the stat block changes. So, yeah! Wow! So, ba-da-ba-ba-bum! Our next one is adjusting pre-existing monsters. So, this is essentially taking the pre-existing stat block of a creature or a monster and making more moderate to heavy changes to it. These can have aesthetic changes, but this can also be used to more so rebalance or to create a new monster. So you can essentially do a more intense version of just reskinning, or you can actually adjust these stat blocks to create an entirely, you know, like a new monster. Or if you want to use the vampire but your party's only level 5, you can use these changes to completely rebalance the stat block without completely like nixing everything and creating something from scratch. Wow. Whoa, so cool. This is kind of like this is a nice in-between between reskinning and then doing it from scratch. This is like your middle ground. So to kind of give an example of this, I wanted to make a goblin zombie. And there are no goblin zombies, you know, in D&D, or at least I didn't have any goblin zombies. So I was like, well, how are we going to do this? So basically, I took the goblin stat block. And well, okay, it's not a zombie. It's just a corrupted goblin, okay? I wanted to make like a mushroom goblin thing, but then I was like, ugh, this is going to be too complex for this PowerPoint. So I'm just going to make him corrupted or zombie-ish. Anyway, so if we look at the goblin stat block here, we can see he's got an AC of 15, 7 hit points, speed of 30 feet, strength of 8, 14 dex, 10 con, 10 int, 8 whiz, 8 charisma. He has a stealth of 6, dark vision, common and goblin as languages, a CR of 1/4, and nimble escape. The goblin can take the disengage or hide action as a bonus action on each of its turns. Scimitar. It's got a weapon attack, and it has a short bow ranged attack. So, for our corrupted goblin, we can see here that the armor class is very similar. However, the AC is now 14, and I have buffed the hit points a good margin, making them 15 instead of 7. So I would actually probably put that as 3d6 instead of 2d6. That was my own fault when I made this. So that would be 15 hit points for 3d6. So it's one more hit point die. And then he has a speed of 30 feet. Initiative's the same. But I decided to go ahead and change the stat sum to also kind of reflect the corruption within. They're not too different, but it's different enough it still makes it feel like a different creature. So I actually wisdom and charisma are the same, but I raised its strength and I lowered its dex, and then I also raised its constitution. So I left the mental stats the same, but then I changed the physical stats to show how the corruption has affected this creature. I kept the skills the same, sense is the same, language is the same. So for CR here, you could argue that this creature could be also a challenge rating 1 or 1/2. I think this will depend party to party, which is why CR is kind of icky, whatever. So then we have the goblin has nimble escape, but I gave our little goblin guy necrotic escape, which does the same thing, but I just named it differently to be different. But it's the same ability. It's the exact same. And then I also gave him a new ability, which is called Spore Cloud, which is why one of the reasons he has a higher CR. So, any creature within 10 feet that deals damage to the corrupted goblin must make a DC 12 con save or be poisoned for 1d4 rounds. So this is a nice, fun, it's like an easy-ish save, but it still comes with a heavy consequence, and it shows like that this goblin is not just a normal goblin. There's something wrong with him. And then for our actions, before where we had a scimitar, now this goblin just has a claw attack, but it does the exact same amount of damage, slashing damage, but it also does 2 extra necrotic damage on top of his normal damage, reflecting the higher CR change. And then for the short bow, I changed that to Spore Sack. So it's still a ranged weapon. However, I actually lessened the range. And instead of piercing damage, I made it poison damage. So I gave it a smaller range, and I changed the damage type to more reflect it being something corrupted and gross and evil. And then for the claw, I added more damage. So trying to like not make things too crazy, but also up the danger of this guy just a wee bit. But you can see it definitely still feels like a goblin, but it's definitely also not a goblin. So it's changed enough that it feels different without even having to make a lot of descriptive changes. So what you could do is say for the regular goblin, you could describe him as you see a small yellow creature with long pointed ears and a giant round bulbous nose, as he has a massive kind of mace in his hand. And then to make our corrupted goblin feel more special, you see what feels like a goblin. However, it is very off because as you look at the skin, it's not the normal yellow. You see all along its body are cracks of an ashen color, and its bright red eyes have faded to a dull gray. And you see on its back these large pustule sacs. But it still has its bulbous nose. And it begins to shriek towards you, something like that. Like it's still a goblin, but mechanically it functions differently. And this is just an example. So it's like this is a little bit more work, but it's for when you want to create something a little bit more unique that has more mechanical changes than just the reskinning. So yeah. Wow! That's our second one. Oh my god, I'm dreading this third one. I'm gonna be so real with you guys. Alright. Alright, boys. Here we fucking go. Number 3. Creating creatures from scratch. This is the most pain in the butt one. 100%. 100%. So, most time consuming and difficult. I would highly recommend taking inspiration from pre-existing creatures and monsters. I would also consider the balancing techniques I kind of talked about earlier. 100%. It takes a lot of time to learn how to do this. If you're creating monsters from scratch and you are a new dungeon master, I highly recommend talking to your party and letting them know this is your plan. Because if you create a monster and it is way too overleveled and it TPKs them, and that was not your intention, you want to make sure that they're aware. If you're like, hey, and they know you're a new DM too, like, I want to try doing this thing, let me know how you guys feel about this, all that kind of, like, talk to them, because communication is key. It's key. God damn it. Communicate with your party. Blah. Anyway. And it's also always okay to adjust your monsters on the fly. If you're seeing that, like, maybe your party is doing too much damage, or the monster's attacks are too powerful, or whatever it may be. Say something like this. Say your monster applies the stun condition, and you're realizing it's stunning your players for too long. The next time someone hits it with an attack, no matter how many hit points it has, make that creature feel that blow. So say if your sorcerer hits it with a fireball. All right, so as your magic erupts from you and you watch as this brilliant green blast of fire surrounds the creature, you see it looks incredibly dazed. Its eyes are glazed over. It can't see. The smoke and the blast was too much. And then reward them. Be like, now, you're stunned. Now, this creature can only stun you until the end of your turn. Or whatever. Just lessen the punishment or the blow that the creature's dealing. And that way, it makes the players feel like they're accomplishing something, and you're not just being like, oh, well, I fucked this encounter up. Sorry, guys, it's too powerful. Or sorry, I guess here, I think I didn't balance it right. Let me just fix it. You don't want to break that immersion unless that's the kind of table you play at. But this also gives your characters a chance to feel powerful and cool, and it's also can make it feel like a unique mechanic. I don't always recommend this, but if you have to balance things on the fly because you're new and you're learning, then that's totally okay, and there's cool ways to do it so it doesn't feel like shit and can actually make your encounter improved and make your players feel even better about it. So I really, my best advice for this is just practice and talk to your players about it. And then also have them give you feedback and be like, hey, was this cool? Did you like this? Was it too hard? Was it too easy? How are we feeling? And also look at examples. There are great examples all over the internet of people who do amazing, phenomenally well-balanced homebrew who really understand the rules of the game. So look at inspiration. That's a really, really big thing, but don't also just directly steal someone's shit. Don't do that. But take inspiration from all the cool people who make awesome things on the internet. But keep in mind, I would say really just keep in mind your party's average HP, their average AC, and also their level, and then just give your creature appropriate abilities based on that. So don't give a creature an attack that does 45 damage if your players only if the person with the most HP in your party only has 36 HP. That's just not gonna end well. So I would not recommend that. But it is your table. Do it however you want. Just communicate with your players. These are all just my own opinions and recommendations, blah 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 blah. You guys know the drill. You guys know the drill. Blah, blah. Anyway, it's really just practice looking at other things and kind of having a good grasp of how the rules work. I think is really important. A lot of DMs don't actually know the rules. I've definitely noticed this. I've sat at a lot of tables. I'm a pretty rules lorry player. I don't catch everything. I'm not perfect. But as a dungeon master, I know it sucks, but read the rules. It's not that hard. Take the fucking 20-30 minutes and read the rules so you understand them. And that way, it also makes it easier to homebrew so you can have more fun creating and doing the things you want to. Ah! Read the rules! Ugh. Anyway, I'm gonna show you guys an example of a homebrew creature that I made from scratch. That I did take inspiration from other places. I'll tell you about my inspiration, all that kind of stuff. However, I would like to mention, I think the CR is way too low for this creature, potentially. I think because how this creature is designed, CR doesn't work very well. I think it's just a flaw in the CR system, but also it could be a flaw in my own design. Anyway, we're going to talk about it now. Some of you may be familiar with it because I did updated it. Don't worry, it's the new version. No one's seen this version yet. Anyway, because, wow, we're gonna talk about the Chadling. Ooh, go Chadling. Wow. Ooh. Woo! Okay. So, I know. This is a big ass stat block. Cry about it. Anyway. Currently the Chadling CR is 2. However, I'm very tempted to boost that up potentially to 3. The only reason it is at 2 right now is because the Chadling only has 10 hit points and an armor class of 14. So, easy to kill unless it kills something first, essentially. So, let's talk about it, eh? It has AC of 14. It has 10 hit points, a speed of 40 feet, and also a climb speed of 40 feet. Strength of 10, 18 dex, 12 con, 8 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and a 14 charisma. It's proficient in arcana, sleight of hand, and stealth. Here's why it's a challenge rating 2 and very good. It's good. It is resistant to all damage but force, radiant, and psychic. All damage but force, radiant, and psychic, and it's immune to poison damage and immune to the poison condition. I mean, that's why it's not a CR like 1/4. It's crazy. It's got 120 feet of dark vision, passive perception of 10. It speaks Common, Elvish, Infernal, and Sylvan. CR2, proficiency bonus +2. So, shape changer. The Chadling can use its action to polymorph into a beast form that resembles a bat, speed 10 feet, fly 40 feet, or a frog. Speed 40 feet, swim speed 40 feet, or back into its true form. Its statistics are the same in each form except the speed changes. Any equipment it is wearing or carrying is not transformed. It reverts to its true form if it dies or becomes incapacitated, which is great. However, the Chadling also has magic resistance, so the Chadling has advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. And familiar. The Chadling can serve another creature as a familiar, forming a telepathic bond with its willing master. While the two are bonded, the master can sense what the Chadling senses as long as they're within 1 mile of each other. While the Chadling is within 10 feet of its master, the master shares the Chadling's magic resistance trait. Wow! So basically, it only has 10 hit points, except it's resistant to most damage, so it has closer to about 20 hit points when you average out, because force, radiant, and psychic damage are not very common damage types. So, yeah. And also, this is probably the most powerful familiar in the game, so it's not super balanced. This is specifically designed with something that I have in mind that I'm creating, which is why I'm aware that it's not the most balanced, like, as a familiar, but it's, for me, it serves a story purpose, versus an actual balanced mechanical purpose. So you can debate if you want this to be CR2, 3, or even CR4. At the end of the day, CR doesn't, like, it matters, but it also doesn't matter that much as long as you understand your party, how they function, what their limitations are, and what they're good at. That's really the most important thing. It's not CR, it's understanding your party and what they can do. Like, if I throw a Chadling at my party and they're level 2, I know they can handle it, it's fine. But if my party is level 3, I throw a Chadling at my party and I know they can't handle it, then I might adjust some things, to make sure that they can. Anyway, actions. Wow, which is also, it has a tentacle attack, but in its beast form, it is a bite attack. So it's a melee weapon attack with +4 to hit. It has a reach of 5 feet, and 1 target. Hit does 1d4 plus 3 bludgeoning damage, and the target must succeed a DC 10 Constitution saving throw or take 5 poison damage and become poisoned for 1 minute. The target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. Great. Forced to smile. This, so a lot of these I took inspiration from. This is one that I came up from scratch. Is my forced smile action. It's pretty funky. So, forced smile. The Chadling can use its action to force a creature it can see within 60 feet to smile uncontrollably and unnaturally. The creature must have a mouth and make a DC 12 wisdom saving throw or be forced to smile at an unnatural capacity for 1d4 rounds. While the creature smiles in this way, it cannot speak, cast spells with verbal components, or take reactions, but the creature can take other actions as normal. The creature also takes 1d4 slashing damage per round as the area around its mouth is slowly ripped open by the unnatural smile. The Chatlin's Master is immune to this effect. So, I think this is fun. It's a really cool, unique ability. It's something I highly recommend if you're creating a monster from scratch. There's probably a reason for it, and you're probably doing it for a specific purpose rather than just reskinning or adjusting an already existing stat block. So try and come up with at least one unique action that you know other creatures don't have that make this creature feel terrifying and different than other creatures in the monster manual, Mordenkainen's tome, all the things. You know, you want something that sets it apart. So I would just recommend having one unique action that you just kind of come up with by yourself. But yeah, it also has Soul Suck, which is a once per day ability. The Chatling consumes the soul of a creature that was killed by itself or an ally. The deceased creature can only be revived by True Resurrection or a Witch spell, and the Chatling gains a number of class levels equal to half the creature's class levels if they had any. If the creature did not have any class levels, the Chatling gains 1d4 temporary hit points per 5 hit points the creature's maximum HP. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I don't think it's a CR2, but, you know, based on the hit points and the armor class. But, you know. Anyway, it also has a bonus action, which is invisibility. It is concentration, so it has to concentrate like it's concentrating on a spell. But it magically turns invisible until it attacks or uses Shape Changer. Any equipment the Chatling wears or carries is invisible with it as a bonus action. So, it's pretty dangerous. But this is also technically my fan mascot, so I wanted it to be powerful. That's the point, right? Because when I designed this, that was my intention. I wanted it to be powerful. I wanted it to be strong because of what it's representing. So that was my intention, was to have something that's more overpowered. So also keep your intentions in mind, and also, you know, your party level in mind when you're doing these things. Like I said, really the most important thing is just talking to your party in practice. I would homebrew a few monsters and compare them to other CR monsters, kind of from like that CR range that you're going for, before actually throwing something you've created from scratch at your party. And I would first start with reskinning or kind of adjusting stat blocks before you get into creating monsters from scratch. Just my recommendations. But yeah, also Chatling is available publicly on D&D Beyond. This is the 2.0 Chatling version, which I believe should also be available. But yeah, so that's kind of it for the main gist of the PowerPoint. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Drop your comments in the description if you have any questions. But make sure to please subscribe to the channel. It means so much, and it's free. I hope everyone has an amazing and wonderful day and night wherever you are, and it's filled with smiles. Bye! Okay, we're done.